Do not adjust your TV sets. We are here. It's Thursday. It's Wrestling Chat with Friends. I am so excited to welcome you back. It's been a while. I am joined as always by EJ the Collector and a special Thursday drop in from little to no access, not all access, little to no access.
Quite the contrary.
TG. EJ and TG. EJ, how you feeling?
I am here. I am present. I am accounted for. And as always, I am accountable. Great to see you two. Great to see everyone out there. Thank you for the privilege of your time tonight. We got a lot to cover AEW-wise tonight. So let's kick it off with my collector's choice. As I've said before many times on this show, I am a product of like late 80s NWA wrestling on TBS. Grew up with the Road Warriors, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes. That's my wheelhouse. Real wrestling fans remember March 14th, 1986. We had just finished an amazing, I'm sorry, not October 14th. We just finished an amazing summer of a best of 7 matches between Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff for the NWA United States title. On October 14th, 1986, the wrestling world was rocked. Magnum TA driving his Porsche 911 in his hometown of Chesapeake, Virginia, hydroplaned on some water, crashed into a telephone pole. He survived, but he had a career-ending accident. That accident set off a organic storyline, whereas probably one of the top heels in the company outside of Ric Flair, Nikita Koloff, who was one of the Russians at the time, he joined forces with Dusty Rhodes. They created the Superpowers to face off against the Four Horsemen. Nikita went on that Starrcade to face Ric Flair in the main event at Starrcade. Nikita was sort of a fill-in for Magnum TA because him and Dusty were best friends. And in the spring of 1987, one of the more memorable wrestling magazines of all time came out. This magazine was one I've been sort of searching for years. My brother, God bless him, found it on eBay. He sent it to me. I have the famous I Cry for Magnum TA. This is the coming out of Nikita really as a face. He would remain a face for the bulk of his NWA career, really. He became a fan favorite. You look closely, he's got a tear in his eye. Dusty Nikita had an amazing promo after Magnum's accident. But this is one I've been chasing. This is, for me, is one of the more important magazines ever put out in the 80s. And I cried for Magnum TA. Nikita's cried for Magnum TA. I'll have to find Nikita somewhere to get him to sign it. Maybe get Magnum to sign it one day too. But thank you to Andy. And there it is. There's your collector's choice. A 36-year-old periodical. But we are now in the present. Good to see you guys. We're everywhere. What's up?
Did you read any of the articles?
Yeah. So some of the other headlines, it's got early mentions of Sting and Scott Hall.
God, Sting in 1987. Jesus.
Where will these men lead wrestling in 1987? Sting was on our TV like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's amazing. There's an interview with Kerry Von Erich. There's the private side of the Rock and Roll Express Dream Date. British Bulldogs, Road Warriors. But what's cool in this is there's a page of like wrestlers to watch. You know who the feature wrestler to watch is? The Dingo Warrior.
I like it.
Who went on to become the Ultimate Warrior, one of the biggest stars ever. It's a great magazine. I'll flip through it more, but there you go.
That's right up your alley.
It really is.
It's right. I am a big I don't have them now, but I used to collect like all the Street and Smith magazines. Remember those? Remember those, TG? Like the Street and Smith like college basketball edition. And in the back they would have all of the high school profiles. So this was, when I was in high school. So this is like, mid 90s. But I always loved like, high school player to watch, like Rasheed Wallace or like Allen Iverson. It was really cool.
It was also cool when the Parade magazines would come out Sunday morning and have the Parade All-Stars.
They were pretty good, too.
Old episodes of this.
Very nice. TG, limited to no access. How are you feeling, buddy?
I'll say 7 out of 10. 7. Solid.
Is that because of the Red Sox? Is that because of the Red Sox season so far?
Oh, well, I'll tell you.
Or the national season?
Well,
Yes,
I would rather the Nationals be bad because it makes tickets cheaper.
right.
But I don't have any loyalty to them. But the Red Sox have been playing really well. They won 5 in a row, and they're winning tonight. So
Right. Recently, they picked it up.
Yeah. But of course, that they're still in 4th place.
Yeah, the NL and the AL East is very, very tough. Very tough.
Yeah.
But no, man, good to see you. Good to see you back. We're gonna talk some AEW. I want to talk. The first story I want to talk about, as always with us, seems to have less to do with the storylines or what's happening in the ring. But it was announced recently that I guess it's All in Wembley Stadium. This is not the next pay-per-view, by the way. It's not what they're building, but I do think this story has kind of taken a life of its own. I think they're up to 50,000 pre-sales or 50,000 sales now.
Yeah,
for
just
Wembley
over 50.
Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And in England, it will be AEW's first, first live show over across the pond, as they say. What do we make of this? I understand that, when it comes to these types of events in stadiums like this, it kind of seems part of the course now because I'm a huge boxing fan. If they put a boxing event in Wembley Stadium, it seems to be now they're putting a heavyweight champion there like a Tyson Fury, but it always seems to do big numbers. We hear about the global football, if you will. They put the big Champion League matches in Wembley Stadium and they're big. So I've never heard of Wembley Stadium and only a couple thousand people show up, but it's like, what do we make of this? What do we make of this for AEW? Is this as big of a deal as they're making it out to be? A huge, huge crowd for wrestling across the pond.
This is a huge deal and should be treated as such. 53,000 during the pre-sale period. I guess it goes on general sale tomorrow. So, a lot of it was leading up to, and they do this with lots of stadiums. What will be the capacity that they offer up? Wembley with no restrictions can fit 90,000. I doubt that is their target goal. It would not have shocked me. And then you saw some reports that they're going to cap it at 40, 45,000. These were unfounded, but just some ideas, that I think 80 to 90 would be a bit of a stretch. But I think by all accounts, they have exceeded expectations. It is reasonable now when looking at 53,000 that they could get 70, 65 to 75. They'll be north of 60. North of 60 for a wrestling event is huge. And when I say huge, there's no denying that is WWE Big Four gate numbers. Now, they're in England. Wrestling is huge in Europe. Wrestling's huge in America, but you can't imagine AEW even coming close to trying to do 45,000. It's they didn't even crack 800,000 last night. We'll talk about that viewership wise. But these events that WWE can put on, they're Big Four. They're doing it at stadiums now. 60 is like the bare minimum. They're going for somewhere probably closer to 70. AEW putting 60, it'll probably end up being somewhere around the 66 to 69,000. That is a tremendous number. And I hope they can deliver because so far, huge success. I'm all in for it.
I think from a business standpoint, that AEW is doing some things now that probably put them in as good a position potentially as they have been in a while, maybe ever. The fact that they are getting such a huge pre-sale on tickets for a show over there is obviously it's an enormous success. It's not tremendously surprising just from the standpoint of this is the first time they've done a show over there. There's obviously an appetite for that. They have a lot of international stars. I think that it certainly has exceeded expectations, especially the speed with which tickets have been bought up. But the thing about this is that WWE is obviously a behemoth whose, their business is many times larger. But what that also means is that a one-off show that is such a tremendous success like this is going to have a bigger impact for AEW proportionally than it does for WWE.
Yeah.
So the fact that they can recoup this kind of enormous gate, that will make a difference on WWE. These are just numbers on a spreadsheet that might look slightly better or worse. For AEW, this is a difference maker from a business standpoint. And the other stuff that AEW is doing right now, I think, is also going to pay dividends. Well, we can talk about this more, but the fact that they are, changing how they're going to present some of their programming, they're getting rid of dark elevation. I think they're putting themselves in a position where by the end of the summer, they could be on the firmest footing that they have ever been as a company. I think the big question, really, and Elliot alluded to it a minute ago, is can they tell stories that are going to get a week-to-week audience on television? And that has been the challenge so far. Something we talk about a lot in the group chat is there's this recurring theme in AEW where people who seem to be parts of key storylines inexplicably disappear for a while, or maybe they don't disappear, but they suddenly fall down the card and there's not really an explanation for, or doesn't seem to be logic behind that. I think if they can streamline the product on television with, maybe a soft brand split, having a better time slot potentially with a Saturday night show, and sort of condensing what they're doing otherwise with their presentation, I think they could be in a really, really strong position going into late summer and fall. But it's going to be a question of how they handle some of the on-screen storyline stuff.
Couldn't agree more. Cheats, what do you think?
Gentlemen, I had a question for you. I agree with both of you, but I'm interested to get your take on this question. And it may be obvious, but as it currently stands, is AEW the second biggest wrestling company of all time? And what I mean by that is WWE is the biggest wrestling company of all time. Is AEW like the biggest legitimate number two of any of the other promotions that have ever kind of rivaled WWE?
I would say no, but
I would say we can start having that discussion maybe at the end of the summer. Now, NWA, WCW, if we're going to classify that as one the same,
even if you said they were the same, is AEW bigger now than WCW was ever?
Well, just there's longevity and there's history with WCW that AEW doesn't have yet. So I think for that reason, not quite yet. It is noteworthy that this Wembley event has sold more tickets than the largest WCW event that was ever held. And that was at the Georgia Dome, kind of in the peak Monday Night Wars. It was when Goldberg defeated Hulk Hogan for the world title. It was on Nitro. There was like 42,000. So AEW holds the record for second largest gate of ever. Does that put them number two? Probably not in my book, just because WCW/NWA has a little bit longer of an established history that's going to stick in people's mind more and feel, and it just simple volume of content. They're not quite there yet. But by the end of the summer, with the success of All In, with another Forbidden Door, if they ride this momentum that looks like they're on, I'll have that conversation come fall.
Any of those New Japan, Tokyo Dome gates, none of them are bigger than this? So that's what I don't know the answer.
Well, there have probably been, there have been reported that there have been crowds in Puerto Rico that were 60,000, 70,000.
Okay.
Probably in Brazil somewhere.
I honestly was just thinking
there's
Tokyo Dome in Japan.
The Tokyo, I don't know if Tokyo Dome capacity is even that large.
Okay.
The match that Ric Flair had in North Korea a bunch of years ago, they said that was like 190,000 because they were mandated to go. So yes, it is probably not the second largest gate of all time. But from a contemporary sort of standpoint.
TG, you were quick to say no. Is this a silly question?
It's not a silly question. I think what makes it a challenge to answer is that the nature of metrics in all forms of entertainment have changed dramatically in the last certainly 20 years, but you go back 40 years and now it gets really confusing. So one example I'll use is Taylor Swift recently became the first artist in history to occupy all 10 top 10 spots on the Billboard Hot 100 chart.
Right.
But it's really difficult to compare that to like the Beatles, who had all 5 of the top 5, because when the Beatles were making music, you had to go into a record store and purchase a disc for those 5 singles. Taylor Swift, it's just how many, everybody's streaming that album, so all 10 of those songs go to the top. Similarly, when you talk about wrestling, it's like, okay, so this show is obviously, it's a high watermark in terms of gate. Tickets cost more now. The crowd is certainly bigger, but then you look at a metric like, okay, the business overall seemed to be more at a higher point from certain perspectives in the late 90s during the Monday Night War than it is now. So the audience that Raw and Nitro were drawing back then, I mean, they were getting 4, 5, 6 million for their shows, which now, if you total up Raw, SmackDown, and AEW shows, you're not going to get to that number. And so then it becomes a question of like, so how do we interpret all of that?
Yeah, like inflation, right?
Right. Like what does that mean? Do we just describe it to fragmenting of the audience in the same way that the number one show on TV, 30 years ago was significantly higher than anything that's on TV now?
Sure.
It's tough to compare. I would say, to go back to Elliot's point, I think that if you look at sort of the longevity and the established track record of the NWA/WCW, I think that is probably has to be considered the second most successful wrestling company of all time. But I mean, if AEW is on the road to getting there, doing a show like this is certainly a big step in that direction.
I agree with you 100%. I was just having a conversation with Cameron about top 5 boxing gates of all time. And the last weekend, there was a boxing match that I think rivaled or 2 weekends ago, it rivaled like the casual attention, but it was by no means a household fight. So this is Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis. It's wound up being the 5th highest grossing fight of all time at like 22 million.
Wow.
You can't tell me that Ryan Garcia Tank Davis was bigger than Ali Foreman, Rumble in the Jungle, or you know what I mean, or Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard. Like, they weren't those big type of events, and it's just very hard to measure because of like cost of the ticket. It was like $80 for one paper, and so these are things where it was like I did find it interesting that and I'll get back to the point, but I did find it interesting that the number one grossing boxing match of all time is Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao. That was like $77 million, and 22.8 is number 5. So it's like the gap there is pretty amazing. To get back to the question before we move on, gentlemen, I will say I find it very difficult to say, and I love AEW, but I find it very difficult for a company that has never beaten WWE ever to say it rivals what WCW did when WCW was actually beating WWE for a significant portion of weeks. Obviously, we know the Eric Bischoff podcast where we're 30-something weeks.
83 weeks.
83 weeks. So there was a time where WCW was the number one wrestling company in the world. While WWE was still WWE in many ways. So I still give them the nod. I do think, like everybody said, AEW is on some interesting footing now. And let's just jump right into it, because TG, you alluded to it as well. They've recently made a decision, if they haven't implemented it yet, but it's pretty obvious like Dark and Elevation, the YouTube shows are going. They're gonna, they're working on the Collision deal, which is going to be the Saturday night show. I don't know if they keep Rampage. Dynamite will stay, Collision will be there, and then I guess Rampage stays. I'm not sure, but they're moving away from the Dark and Elevation and the YouTube type shows, and I'm okay with that if it entails better storytelling. I think the problem what they did with Dark and Elevation is that 90% of those shows were to get wrestlers work, and 10% of those shows was to advance any type of storyline and it was kind of these weird types of things that they were just kind of trying out live on air, which was interesting for a wrestling fan that had never seen that. Like, we never really seen, like, if a gimmick could work. Like, the Trust Busters with Ari Daivari was something that was a Dark and Elevation thing that never really played out on TV, you know? But at some point, you're going to be, like, it's just like an hour of wrestling. Like, you know what I mean? And it was like, that's great and all, but that it didn't do it for me. So what are you guys' thoughts on the elimination of Dark and Elevation?
Well, you know, I don't know the costs of putting on a show like that on YouTube. I don't even think it didn't go out live each Monday and Tuesday. It was like
It was a taped show.
They were both taped shows. You know, they were at Daly's Place prior, and now I guess they do it before Dynamite Rampage.
Exactly.
You know, an internet show for an hour on the YouTube sort of feels like no harm, no foul. Like, tune in if you want to. Don't tune in. You know, if you don't want to see it, no big deal. I don't think they were counting on that for really. I think, like you said, they're using it to get people some work. There are a lot of young talent in AEW who will be future names, hopefully, whether it's at AEW or another promotion. If they're given, you know, some of it's for the live crowd that's there. I like it as a enhancement vehicle. I'm sort of either way. I don't think it's going to help nor hurt not having an internet show, but it was different. It hadn't been done before. So, you know, if I had it my way, keep that on, keep some young folks who otherwise wouldn't be on the road or on TV, put them out there. But if you're not going to do that, you have to focus on making sure these 2 or 3 shows you're going to have on TV have more continuity and up their game some. So I'm sad to see it go, because I think for a lot of folks, it was their one salvo on getting on some sort of in people's faces. So if that gets replaced by road shows, that's not going to get them on TV, but it'll still accomplish that practice and getting in front of a few people who can see their work. TJ, what do you think?
I have 3 key takeaways or impressions about this. One is that I think that first, the behind the scenes on this apparently is that Warner Brothers Discovery has told AEW, we want 100% of your televised or broadcasted programming to be on our TV. So that was the impetus for them to eliminate this, was like, we don't want anything outside of our umbrella. That to me is actually a good sign, because it means that Warner Brothers is more invested in AEW and isn't looking to like put them off to the side, or like, we don't care, this is stupid wrestling, whatever. They're like, no, we see this as something valuable, but we want all of it to be, you know, coming through us. So that's a good thing. I think the second point is, you'll remember one thing that AEW has kind of shifted away from slowly but surely is that one of their big selling points when they first started was that they wanted wins and losses to matter, and they wanted a ranking system and all that. They wanted to be a little more in the direction of sports. And I, you know, from my perspective as a sports guy, I'm like, okay, that's interesting to try it and present yourself in more contrast to WWE in that way. But I think that the practicality of that, especially when you get rid of Dark and Dark Elevation, it becomes difficult. So I think you'll still see things like the on-screen graphics where they say, you know, Willow Nightingale has won 3 of her last 4 matches, that kind of thing. But I think that a lot of the sort of building up records type stuff is falling by the wayside, which I think is fine. The third thing is, and this is my big concern as well, how do you now get work for your young and up-and-coming people? WWE has the Performance Center and they have NXT. They have a very, very strong pipeline for training and getting people TV ready. AEW, I think, and I alluded to this in the group chat, I think that AEW is now going to have to use the commitment to do house shows as the way to do that. The question I have is, for a company that really, you know, partially due to the pandemic, obviously, has not really built up a strong house show infrastructure. Are they going to be able to get young talent the reps that they need on the road to get them to where they need to be for TV? I don't know. They may create something that is akin to a performance center or something like that to get people ready off air. But I think that's one thing they've got. If that's going to be the biggest challenge of this, and really, I think the only big negative is that they need some place for that to happen. Final thing, the thing that's kind of a question for me though is I'm not sure. Like Warner Brothers Discovery, as insistent as they were about keeping all of the AEW stuff under their umbrella, they were kind of neither here nor there when it comes to Ring of Honor stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's all part of the theoretically the same, parent company. So I don't know what that says about the potential long-term viability of Ring of Honor.
Ring of Honor really is just sort of an offshoot of AEW now, just because Tony owns it all. When I asked this in the group chat, what I don't know is, as a wrestling fan who wants to see the AEW product and wants to see the Ring of Honor product, there's got to be something with Warner Brothers and Discovery that Tony can't just make Rampage a Ring of Honor show. I wish he could. That seems like that would solve a lot of things. You'd have 2 AEW programs. You'd have a dedicated Friday night Ring of Honor show. All these shows will have different sort of themes. So the commitment to keep Ring of Honor on this TV, on this streaming platform, it might work, because otherwise I would be in full favor of, because if you're going to make Rampage sort of like your Thunder, sort of like your Sunday Night Heat, that's not a great. We've seen how that will turn out. So they have to have three different shows, or Ring of Honor can move to Friday. I want to hear the explanation of why that is or is not being considered.
So one quick point on that, I think that. So what I'm getting at is, it would actually be really beneficial if they could turn Ring of Honor, use that brand as their developmental, sort of like NXT, maybe with a couple of crossover guys at the top to be the title holders and work with younger talent. But they need some place where they can get people reps, like I said. But Rampage, to me, that Rampage, in my opinion, is maybe the biggest, I don't want to say mistake, but the biggest misstep of AEW from a business standpoint, because once they sort of realized how those sports rights deals were going to impact Rampage, they should have done something else with that. Because if you're on, like, one week you're on at 5:30 and the next week you're on at 11:30 or midnight, and it's you're set up to fail, and it's not through any fault of the performers or anything else. It's just like you can't build an audience that way. So anyway,
yeah, Mark, you didn't watch Dark Revelation too much either, but what do you think?
If it's part of the plan, I'm fine with it. I am concerned about reps because they do have a lot of young talent that need to get work. But again, as a show standpoint, it wasn't that entertaining. It was because there was a lot of green wrestlers and there was no storylines connected to them.
Mm-hmm.
And any wrestling fan that followed AEW kind of worth anything kind of knew the outcome of the entire night, because there were really no surprises. There wasn't like, a major upset that was going to happen on either one of those shows,
right?
Because they would have saved that for bigger TV,
right?
I am really interested in a couple of things. I am interested in Ring of Honor, because the product that is currently being released for Ring of Honor week to week, like, is a really good product. Like, they have top tier wrestlers wrestling on Ring of Honor on whatever show they're kind of creating for subscribers or whatever it is. It's a weekly output of really good stuff, and it almost feels like no one's paying attention to this. Like, no one, like, there was a lot of excitement when it's like TK acquired Ring of Honor. We're going to figure out what to do with it. We had the Ring of Honor pay-per-views that actually did really well. But like now they're making a really, I don't know what to equate this to because they're making a really good product week after week, and I don't think anyone's paying attention to it. So I don't know how you measure that. But I don't necessarily need Dark and Elevation. I just do think that now you have almost a bigger problem, which is it's going to get into our next segment about what we always talk about. And we talked about a little bit. TG already alluded to the biggest kind of challenge and ongoing challenge, but this is going to be a quick. Consider this a rapid fire answer, if you will. But the question is, who deserves better this week or the last couple of weeks? Who right now deserves better in AEW? I'll start it because this is a new segment to let you guys think. But I was watching last night, and it struck me 2 individuals in my world I think really, really deserve better right now. The first one was the aforementioned by someone, I think TG mentioned the name Willow Nightingale.
Mm-hmm.
Willow Nightingale was building something with the crowd through her enthusiasm. Somebody wrote in the group chat, might have been you, EJ. She has Bayley energy, and I agree, like Bayley face energy. And they put her in the ring every week with someone from the Outsiders or something like that, where she's gonna lose, take a pin, and get beat. It didn't fail. Saraya, dumps her, pins her. Willow Nightingale, again, is one of those people that actually gets wins on Ring of Honor, but I think she really, really deserves better right now because she has the potential to be a homegrown star that is over. The other one, and I just think he's just too good, and now I'm starting to think on the men's side that AEW has just misused him and haven't figured it out. Ethan Page is gold.
Yeah, he is.
Ethan Page is so funny and so good. And he's got MJF type energy and chops. He may not be as good as MJF in the ring, but he's got that type of ability as a talker, as a personality. He's got a look. He's got a very punchable face. And he plays this heel role really, really good with Stokely. Those are my 2 rapid fire answers. Willow Nightingale and Ethan Page deserve better. Who wants to go first?
I got a name that popped in my head as soon as you asked the question. I think your picks are great.
Mm-hmm.
I like Ethan Page a lot as well. First name that popped in my head was Ricky Starks. He was a guy who was clearly leveling up, was over, turned face, and was super over as a face. And then it's again, he disappears, and now he's weirdly in a feud with Juice Robinson, and it's I don't know.
Well, it's going to be Jay White. That's right. What they're building to, yeah.
Right, but I don't know. I felt like one thing that AEW seems to consistently struggle with is when and we've talked about this before, they have a guy or a girl who gets hot and is, either organically over or they've started to push them and it's oh, it's working. And then they just forget about them or they just get lost in the shuffle. And it's confusing to me. But anyway, Ricky Starks is a guy that popped in my head.
I get the sense sometimes, and I've got a little bit of this from watching All Access this past week, that, Tony, like hopefully any good creative mind and booker, he has a book that has the next year and a half laid out as far as possibilities and chapters. Take Ricky Starks, for instance. He got the win over Chris Jericho. Jericho was feeling magnanimous a handful of weeks ago, was giving out wins to Action Andretti, is giving out wins to Ricky Starks. And then that Ricky looked like he was pivoting towards maybe a stronger main event run. Well, I think in Tony's creative book, the spring of 2023, this was the Pillars sort of chapter. So Ricky wasn't going to be involved any higher because Darby and Sammy and MJF were going to occupy that main event scene. And if you're not involved with Chris Jericho or the Blackpool Combat Club or the Elite, you are struggling to find your place. And that's where Ricky's in that spot. Another one, here's my submission, which is crazy to think about because this guy was a title holder a couple of weeks ago. And before that, they were doing weekly vignettes, Powerhouse Hobbs, a future a future superstar who literally was in a trios battle royale last night with QT Marshall. Like, that's like, oh, how the mighty have fallen. He has no active storyline. You know, he's not seemingly getting back involved with Wardlow anytime soon. He may, but, you know, big guys like him, like, you know, Luchasaurus, Brian Cage, he should be performing more regularly and in feuds higher than that because they built him up for that. And now he's taking a place down. Like, think about all the guys we haven't seen lately. They all are probably overall more experienced than Powerhouse Hobbs. Guys like Hangman Page, Eddie Kingston, and they're not on TV. Those guys needed as much, you know, back on TV as much as Powerhouse Hobbs does. So there's just so much talent that, like, 2 shows, even 2 well-run shows, aren't enough for what AEW has collected. And there's just so, you turn your head and there's like, oh, we got to figure out Jay White. Oh, wait a minute, we got to figure out Adam Cole. There is so much top talent there that this, unless you're Sammy Guevara or Jack Perry or Darby Allin right now, any of these homegrown stars are going to have trouble flourishing. And that's a problem, but, you know, oftentimes it's a good problem to have, but the up and down lack of really character development is just going to keep dragging AEW down until they can figure out the right vehicles to give all these guys opportunities.
I think it's interesting. Will Hobbs is 32 years old. I don't think it's an experience thing. Because guys like Adam Cole, they're 33. Like, Hobbs, I think, is definitely deserves a little bit better. It's interesting because the arc of both Will Hobbs and Ricky Starks are people that seem to been building to something, and then they kind of just got fizzled out or dropped. As a constant AEW discussion we have. I am a All Access mark as well. Obviously, I know what it is. I don't put a lot of salt into what they present as actual real reality behind the scenes stuff as much as I do think it's very strong extension of kayfabe. One of the things that struck out to me, and I do think that this is very interesting, and I'm really surprised they put this on AEW All Access as much as possible, but I do think it goes to your point, Elliot, and I don't know if it debunks it, but I think it gives a real insight into what AEW is doing, and that's Sammy Guevara. So the last 2 weeks on Sammy Guevara, so if you take the last 4 weeks of All Access, Sammy Guevara is a major storyline and big matches, and somebody that was very clear that All Access is going to follow and make almost a face star out of Sammy Guevara. The last 2 episodes of Sammy of All Access, Sammy's like, I've just had the biggest matches of my life. I'm in the ring with Bryan Danielson, John Moxley. I'm doing great. And the last 2 weeks, he's like, I got nothing. I'm sitting here holding a camera. I have no story, no creative. And it's the interesting thing about this is I don't think it's because Tony Khan has this big black book with a long-term plan. I think that Tony Khan defers basically to a lot of the EVPs and other folks. And I just don't think he has, believe it or not, he does a lot of things. He does a lot of things well. But I don't think that this is long-term black book planning that says, like, this is this chapter, this is this chapter. I think it really is wrestlers getting lost in the shuffle to the point where you're making a whole spinoff show about all of these guys. And one of these stars of the show literally is going around for 2 weeks behind the scenes saying, I have no work. I'm just showing up here with nothing to do. And I thought it was so illuminating. And, like, it was the one thing that I was like, I can't believe they're showing this and running with this because they really have to get their stuff together. Like, this is the one thing that I'm like, this can't be, because we're all in the audience, we're all looking at it like, where's Sammy this week? And like, now we know he was doing nothing.
So let me throw out a question to you guys about All Access and what your thoughts are on this. I think, Mark, first of all, I think you're absolutely right. And one thing that has occurred to me is that All Access, I think, it is it's a fascinating show, no question. So from that standpoint, it's a big success. But I think that the behind the scenes goal that they had when they put this on TV, I think they are doing more harm than good in service of that goal. Because I think that, like, so to use an easy example from the early days of the show, they're presenting things like, oh, Britt Baker is really this, basically the de facto leader of the women's division behind the scenes, and she's presented as like being really strong and forceful and all this, and meanwhile they're burying Thunder Rosa. But as a viewer, I find myself being more sympathetic to Thunder Rosa's situation and being sort of like more standoffish towards Britt. And I think there are a lot of examples of that where they are trying to like, oh, let's frame the EVPs in like a sort of a self-serving positive light. But then when it comes across on TV, like they may think it looks great, but I think to the viewer, it's like, something's wrong here. This is not, so do you all think it is achieving the goal that they have, or do you think it is doing more harm than good from that perspective?
I don't. I'm curious as to what they truly are trying to achieve. I think this is an extension of further creating characters. So what we're seeing, today was filmed in December. Mm-hmm. So take the Sammy and Tay arc of the last few weeks of All Access. 2 weeks ago, it was Tay sitting in front of the camera talking about how Sammy's getting all these great opportunities, and I've sort of fallen off. And Sammy's talking about, that's how the wrestling business is, especially with a married couple, one's up, one's down. And 2 weeks ago, it was Sammy who was way, way up, Tay way, way down, needed that pick me up. I think the character arc to them flipping was too fast. Like this past week, Tay was being featured. They used the Ruby Soho Tay interaction as the sort of main part of the show on Wednesday. And Sammy, there's a little bit of character acting as you do in pro wrestling in this too. Sammy, I think Sammy's tears were probably pretty genuine. His dreams coming true. He was doing this when they went to visit his old wrestling haunts in Austin. But it wasn't very believable that Sammy could be this down where just a few weeks ago he was the one that takes. So, that's just, I think, part of the drama scripted acts part of All Access, which similarly, Ruby Soho probably isn't winning any Oscars for acting. She's a terrific wrestler, but when I was watching Wednesday night, I thought it was pretty clear to me that the directive given to Ruby was, you're the antagonist in this situation. So you need to sort of definitely act suspicious of Tay. Like if they were really feeling that way, if this was a real backstage thing, that'd be a hostile work environment. I wouldn't want to be in it. So, I don't know if Tay and how good their friends there are, but it's just an extension of the scripted show. And it's designed to feature this Britt Baker and Adam Cole. It's been designed to feature Tay and Sammy. There haven't been too many, and then this elite storyline. I'm curious as to how long this is going to go. I'm curious if they're going to bring other people into the fold to have sort of these personal stories. Like I hope it does. If you are okay with kayfabe being completely blown up, it's a really excellent show to watch. I enjoy it. I get enough of the backstage realism. As an adult, I can appreciate what's real, what's scripted, what's enhanced. But as far as along those lines of any of these reality shows, I'll watch that over most anything because it shows enough of their human side, but it will also give the wrestling fan a reason to like Britt, to not like Britt, to like the elite, to hate the elite, and the Bucks. And I'm having those range of emotions every week, so that's why I'm really enjoying it.
Gentlemen, I will leave it with this. I've watched several episodes and several seasons of Total Divas. This show is not Total Divas. It is a lot worse. Total Divas is a much better
what
faked. Oh yeah. The Bella twins. Trinity and the Funkadactyl, they were Total Divas is a much better reality scripted show. And I will argue that the show with Cody Rhodes and Brandy, the Rhodes show,
to the Top, or
Rhodes to the Top was a better show than All Access. It's interesting.
I can't comment because I didn't see any of those.
You gotta watch Rhodes. You didn't road Rhodes to the Top. You should watch that. No. You would enjoy that.
Really?
Yeah, because it actually, I think by following one subject like Cody and Brady and their roles as at the time EVPs, both of them, and what they had to do outside of the actual ring work, and Cody running the Nightmare Factory and all those things came into play, and who his real friends are, like who really showed up at the house while they were going, like Ricky Starks and Cody are real friends. We knew that not from the WrestleMania picture, but the fact that Ricky Starks was at his house, like hanging out, you know what I mean? Those are things. Now, granted, that's a scripted show as well, but those were things that I thought gave you a real insight. Like, what's his name? Our guy, Shotty Lee Johnson and Julia Hart coming up and telling Cody, like, we're dating now. And he's just like, okay. Like, those are things that I don't know if you would get on All Access, even the way that it's presented.
It's all sort of like what you as the viewer are more interested in seeing.
Yeah, I think All Access now, and I've watched a bunch of episodes and seen this. My concern, honestly, is one, what Tom was saying about, is it really doing the point that it's supposed to? And it's convoluted and confusing. Like, it really isn't that well.
What are you confused about?
Like, are we supposed to like Sammy? Are we supposed to feel something for Tay? Because I don't like the Thunder Rosa one's a great example, because basically they're trying to pose Brett and the other girls as people that really care about the industry, but all it's doing is making them look like mean girls.
Exactly.
Literally, that's sitting in a room. Right. They're the mean girls in the Mean Girl movie, talking about Thunder Rosa, who's crying because she physically can't do what she wants to do when she came back. You know, she comes back to the ring. And then ultimately we realized she did come back to the company, so it couldn't have been that bad. She's doing Spanish commentary as we speak. But it's like these three bratty mean girls are like, well, if she can do commentary on Busted Open every week, she can show up to wrestle. It was like,
some of this is,
it didn't go well.
Well, it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. Some of it is to further, to further the character development on these TV shows. Soraya's,
I'll tell you what I liked. I liked the Brett Baker going back to her dentistry and like working. Like, I like that.
Yeah.
I liked Kyle O'Reilly working out with Adam in their home gym type stuff. But it seemed like I think the misses are what you talked about. Mello trying to talk to Ruby Soho in front of cameras for probably one of the most private conversations they're supposed to have. And then Ruby, who I think most people will actually say Ruby Soho is a pretty nice person. It's kind of universal. Her having to come off as being a dick. Like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make it. Like, the one thing that I laughed out loud, and I think I mentioned this in the past, was when Sammy Guevara was like, I got to apologize to Eddie Kingston. And Eddie Kingston was like, I don't give a shit. Like, why are you sitting here? Right. This is the wrestling business. This happens. Like, I really don't care. Go away, kid. And it was like, that was the only like honest thing that I was like, but I don't want to belabor the point. I actually watch All Access. I do watch it every week. All right, I'll stop. But the Young Bucks almost retiring. No, they weren't.
Yeah, no, they weren't.
This is ridiculous.
It's exposing, I think, a little bit of my criticism. I think the Young Bucks are disingenuous, and this show doesn't do them a lot of favors. I also think this show is behind the scenes. I think this is largely, not exclusively, largely a Tony Schiavone produced vehicle. Sure. I think this is one of his.
I hope so. I hope Tony Khan has nothing to do with this.
Things he can do. Yes. Tony has a candle for Britt since the company started. It would not shock me if Britt is able to dictate some of this narrative that maybe Tony has empowered Britt to be in a creative position for some of this stuff. I think it wouldn't surprise me that Britt was sort of angling this to fit some narratives and just sort of getting over on Tony because Tony loves her. So there's a lot, and I hope it'll get better. It'll continue to get better. I hope AEW really needs to have a better creative team in place rather than we've seen what the whims of one person can do to a wrestling show. We've seen that for years and years and years.
Can I just say also? Seriously, can I just say TV is a weird thing. Reality TV is a weird thing. The idea, like, in order for these people to be on the show, all of them are in this together. Right. Okay. So it's not like Brett's going to get over on Tony Schiavone. No, they're all in it together. They all think this is a great idea. Like, but
only a handful are in that editing room. Only a handful are in that room.
Here's where I was getting at. The interesting thing is who chooses not to be on the show.
Agree.
That is the part of this that if you're on the show and you're featured and you have storylines on the show, you think it's a great idea. If you are, let's just say, maybe John Moxley,
I was just
right,
John
or somebody like Bryan Danielson, who was on Total Divas, by the way, but not on this as much. He might do I'll give you a couple minutes here and there, but the ones that really choose not that are big enough to be in it, but kind of ease out of it. That's the interesting thing. I don't think that anybody in the show, I don't think Sammy Guevara wants to get over on Jungle Boy or I don't think Brett is trying to take advantage of Shivani's kindness. No, I think all of them think, because you see this over and over again. There's a VH1, I'll never forget. There's a VH1 reality show about the legendary hip hop station Hot 97. That was supposed to be like the next Love and Hip Hop, but they were like type thing. But they were like, we're gonna make it a reality show with it's like a comedy show. It's like a spoof of reality show. And Angie Martinez, the voice of New York, people's like, no, I want nothing to do with this. You can use Peter Rosenberg, you can use all these other people, and it's an interesting thing that I think once you're in it, so I think Brett Baker, Tony Schiavone, Sammy Guevara, Mello, the EVP, all of them are in it. I think they're all together. The people that may be kind of subject to it are the people that aren't in it.
Yeah. So one final thought on this, and then we can move on if you guys want. But the point you made, Mark, is kind of where I am with this, which is, say what you will about Total Divas. Total Divas was never confusing from the standpoint of, okay, what story are they trying to tell here? Pretty basic. Like if you were in the 4th grade, you could kind of follow it. What I don't get about All Access is it's are they trying? Is it for example, the Young Bucks genuinely think that they are presenting a version of themselves that is sympathetic and that the audience is going to be like, oh man, wow, I didn't realize they were that close to retirement. Or is there a layer to this where it's we're going to put this out there knowing that the audience is going to resent us for being disingenuous, as you said, because that's how they come across. And I'm not sure. And that is a bad place to be. You're in no man's land. So if it's like kayfabe and we are doing subtle things that clearly are heel things to get us over as heels down the road, I'm all in on it. If by contrast, it's something where, no, we're really pulling back the curtain and what we're getting across is what we are intending to evoke in the audience, then that's also good. The fact that they're in between is what has me kind of scratching my head about, are they really achieving what they're trying to achieve?
Let me ask this about Elliot, then we'll move on. Because Elliot, you like the show. I actually do like the show.
I don't dislike the show.
Right. Let me ask this though. Elliot, when you look at the show, all the episodes you've seen, who is the good guy? Who are you supposed to be cheering for?
Right.
Oh, I think you're supposed to be as through now, you're supposed to be cheering for Adam Cole.
Yep.
And you're supposed to be cheering for Sammy Guevara.
Okay. Those
are the two that I've enjoyed the Sammy Tay interaction better than most of the others. The Brit, we're about to see, Adam's. It seems like on Wednesday we saw Adam successfully getting cleared to wrestle.
Yep.
That was cool. What I don't care about is Britt and Saraya and doing their thing. I'd like to see other people featured, but I think they're succeeding with me at least with the Sammy storyline and the Adam Cole storyline. And I don't know if everyone feels this way, but when I see the Bucks, this return from the suspension that they're not going to talk about, even though everyone knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think it's a bit swarmy and self-servy, which is what I think the Bucks have always been. It's kind of been my point all along. Is why they're not my favorite two people in the world.
And I agree with you completely. And this is again where the confusion comes in for me. Do the producers of the show, forget about the Bucks for a second, even though they're obviously involved, do they think that what they are putting out there is like, yes, this is self-serving, yes, but it is achieving the self-serving goal of making the Bucks look better? Or do they put it out there knowing they're going to come off as smarmy and, like, that's the confusion I have.
Yeah, I don't know. But here's what I have gauged from this, sort of apropos of nothing, is if this show is supposed to meant to feel a little bit like Bravo-y, I would submit RJ City could become the Andy Cohen of AEW. Host a watch, what is it called? Watch What Happens Live.
Sure, they should.
Host a post Dynamite, or post the Saturday night show. After the show could be some live show. And RJ City, I'm always in favor of RJ City getting some TV time. He finally got on Dynamite.
Yep.
In the last week, got jumped and taken out in a full second. But also, hey, shout out to our friend of the show, Will Washington. He's now employed by AEW.
Yep. He is. I was going to get to that at the end.
I'd love to see his input on some of these shows that AEW I think wants to create outside of their core wrestling programs.
So gentlemen, as we're coming up upon the hour, we did a lot of talking, nothing about the ring. So let's go in the ring for this last segment here. Had another show of Dynamite last night. The big news was, as expected, the championship match for the pay-per-view is now going to be a four-way match, including all pillars. It seems as if the biggest face of the group is going to be Darby Allin. The biggest heel of the group, obviously, is the champion MJF. Then you've got Sammy, who does have this weird kind of all-access shine. People don't know if they should be cheering for Sammy in the storyline part of this. And then Jungle Boy's just there again, as always. He's very talented, but he's just there. There's no real story there. But he dates Anna Jay, so props to him. Where are we with this? Are we excited about this main event as it goes into the pay-per-view? Are they doing a good job telling this story?
TG, take it.
I would say, so selfishly, because I sort of like weird stuff, I was kind of rooting for the main event to be just Sammy and Max, to see like how they would do that, because I really enjoy that pairing of fake friendship. But from a practical standpoint, having the four guys being a four-way is, I think, obviously going to be much more watchable and enjoyable from a wrestling standpoint. I think it'll be a really good match. I think the outcome is pretty obvious, but the spots will be great. They can all work and they work well together. I think in terms of the story being told, what I like about it is something we talked about a few weeks ago, which is you're now putting the spotlight back on these homegrown guys. I think the challenge, again, as we talked about, is MJF obviously is more than ready for prime time. Sammy is solid. I think the other two guys are, you give them a mic for a long period of time and it sort of becomes apparent that, and again, to go back to something we were talking about, like, to me, I know he's not a pillar canonically, but Ricky Starks is better than at least two, probably three of those guys. And so that's where I get into, like, okay, it's cool that they're doing this because they're the pillars, but, I'm fine with this, like, wrapping up at the pay-per-view and then moving on to other things. It'll be a good match.
A pillar match, 3.5 years in, when these guys are kind of caught at the right time. Jack Perry's got some good momentum right now. Darby always does. Sammy, has sort of been up and down, but is seemingly, with the help of not only Access, but with JAS, sort of back in a good position, similar, like, above mid-level, not quite main event talent, but you can put him there at any time of a great match. This match will really showcase all the stuff that Darby and Jack and Sammy do, which is going to be exciting to watch fun to watch. In the end, though, through some underhanded tactics, the right person's going to win in the end. It's what Max does next. His next challenger as we build to maybe, because he doesn't really have a dance partner for Wembley as it's shaping up now. You could look at that landscape and talk about, you'd think an AEW World Heavyweight title match is going to main event their biggest event. Today, I'm saying, no match has been announced yet, but I can think of a couple of matchups that to me are more intriguing over MJF defeating or defending his title against whoever it's going to be, because nothing really long-term is built yet. I like that they're going to finish those 4 pillars. Maybe one of them comes out of that, but I can't see any of those other 3, having a rematch or challenging Max. Max has come up with something big for the summer. And a couple of the biggest names looks like they're going to be coming in with some alternate plans and storylines. So I'm very, very curious to see what happens after this week and who steps up to challenge Max next.
Maybe CM Punk big for Wembley.
CM Punk is big for Wembley, but not against Max.
Who do we? Does anybody leave this outside of the champion looking better in the sense of like they could be main event type folks?
There are people that are main event type folks.
You think so? You think Darby Allin, Jack Perry, or Sammy Guevara are main eventers?
I think Darby Allin. I think Darby, because of his following, can always be a main event level talent. I think Sammy is just about there for consistent top billing, and I don't think Jack Perry's there.
Yeah, I would put, of those 3, I would take Sammy, because when his character is in the right heel mode, I think he can be really entertaining, and like he's good on the mic, but it has to be sort of portray a particular character. When he gets out of that character and tries to be, more sincere or whatever, putting aside All Access, I think he struggles a little bit with that. But that version of Sammy, I think, can be a main eventer. The challenge is that it's not a good mix with Max, because Max is the best heel in that company. Mm-hmm. So, it's sort of a heel and heel type.
Gentlemen, they're building up to an Adam Cole, Chris Jericho showdown. Are we interested in this?
I am. I like those guys.
I'm interested, and I think this will be another example of Chris Jericho will do the right things. I think Adam Cole is somebody who can be in that world title picture next or soon. I put Jay White in that category. I put Adam Cole in that category, and I'd have to think of some other guys. There's not a whole lot that come to mind that are ready for that next. Ricky Starks is ready. They kind of did it before, but Ricky doesn't seem like he's ready to jump up again right now to do it. Some of these top talents. So yes, I think this next pay-per-view is also going to reset some things for the summer and set some things up. But I think Adam Cole is. I think a feud with Chris Jericho is great for the optics of it. But if I was Adam Cole, I'd want to have my sights set on Max after them. That'd be my pick.
Adam Cole, one thing I really like about him is that his promos, like the substance is fine, but his delivery is so sincere and credible. Like he's in the upper echelon of guys across wrestling and that from that standpoint. So I always enjoy listening to him talk, especially when he's got a real issue like he does with
he ruined Keith Lee's career in NXT with a promo.
Kind of like how you feel about Cody Rhodes, right, Tom?
Oh boy. Cody's great in a back and forth. His monologue.
It's actually the
he
opposite.
Reads from his middle school diary.
It's actually the opposite. You actually believe Adam Cole and you don't believe Cody.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned this in the group chat, and I'm going to stick to it, and I want to get your opinions about it, because to me, it seems like every week we're leading AEW off with an Orange Cassidy spot. I actually enjoy Orange Cassidy. I'm just a little bit worried about, like, I don't know if he's overworked and underutilized. I don't know where do we place Orange Cassidy? Do we feel good about where he is? Because he's kind of building up almost a Jade Cargill, not exactly Jade Cargill, but a very interesting what is it called? All Atlantic, Middle Atlantic
International.
World.
International now. Yeah, they changed it.
He's building this, I think, really high international win streak type thing, but it's almost like if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear Orange Cassidy?
He's such a good leadoff hitter for AEW.
He's the best.
I mean, not only because he does it, but you can count on him. What he can do, what he can do in the ring, versus the persona that he came into AEW with. This like laissez-faire character was so sort of like unique and semi-clownish to say it's cool on the indies, but you're not going to have a guy who pretends to kick and punch on TV. Wrestling fans are carnies at the end of the day, and this is just carny goodness, as our friend Heels used to say. So he can go. Him having the title, not having the title, like that, never really. He didn't need a title, but it's great
He's
that this
got the title.
It's great that this sort of weird mid-card title. He's a great placeholder for it because he'll always be there. And when he does eventually lose, the person who will take it from him, I think, will be set up for great things. Orange Cassidy's a great person who can put somebody over. I'm enjoying everything Orange Cassidy's doing. Big fan.
Yeah, I think the international title, or whatever the proper name of it is, has become in some ways sort of a de facto television title, in that it is, I think, the title it's probably defended most on AEW.
He's a workaholic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, he always goes out and delivers in the ring. I think that one thing about if there is a soft brand split, I think one thing that they might do is to create sort of a difference between the two brands. They might siphon some of those sort of guys who have the indie following or came off the indies and were known from that, like, Darby Allin and like Jack Perry and Orange Cassidy, and have them sort of be disproportionately represented on one brand. And then the other one is, as we talked about in the group chat, like maybe more, non-homegrown guys, WWE guys like Mox, like the BCC, other than Wheeler Yuta and, Jericho and those sorts of guys. And I think that would be an interesting thing to do, just from the standpoint of, so one of the things, and Ellie just talked about this, one of the things that I think was a challenge with some of the guys that they brought into AEW at the beginning was like, how is this going to translate to a national television show versus like an indie show, and where there's less tongue in cheek and less sort of winking at a smart audience. And I think Orange Cassidy, to his credit, despite the fact that he had a way out there sort of presentation, really did a good job in sort of adjusting and making that transition. But I think if they do the soft brand split where they do have kind of two different flavors of AEW, that might be one way to do it that would kind of preserve really an indie feel for one show, and then more of a WWE type feel for the other show. So,
well, I was thinking about how the brand split would work too, and I'll just add my 2 cents before we sign off.
We're not going to sign off. We got one more game.
Here's the thing.
Go ahead. But we got a game to play.
If AEW is the Copacabana, what I want is Wednesday nights are for the wives, Saturday nights for the girlfriends. You can have whatever show you want on Wednesday with the Bucks and Omega. I want Saturday to be the real exciting professional wrestling program.
All right, gentlemen. We've got a game we've got to play. It'll probably take a little bit, 5 or 6 minutes.
I'm ready.
Let's not belabor the answers, but This is going to be fun. So think about this. All of the things we know about WWE, the draft, Raw, and SmackDown. All the things we know about this.
Okay.
Now, this is the game. Put this in a little bit of AEW context, but we're going to use Raw and SmackDown. Okay. I'm going to give you names of AEW personnel, and you tell me if they would be drafted to Raw or SmackDown.
For sure.
So you kind of understand what we're doing here. Is this person a Raw person or a SmackDown?
Absolutely.
This is great. I love this. Just because we talked about it ad nauseum. Orange Cassidy. Is he a Raw or SmackDown type person for AEW? Where do you put him?
Raw. I think
Raw. Yep.
So he kind of carries a Raw type brand, right? Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
MJF, I think we all agree SmackDown, right? As
100%.
the champion.
Absolutely.
Jamie Hayter, the
Ooh.
women's champion. What brand would you put
I'll
Jamie
say
Hayter?
Raw. Raw.
Wow!
I'll say SmackDown.
I say
I like it. I like this game. But you go SmackDown, you go Raw.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the reason is because this next person, you're going to flip them, Jade Cargill. Where does Jade go?
SmackDown 100%.
Yeah, if I have to put one of them on SmackDown, I guess I'd put Jade. But
So that flips Jamie Hayter to Raw.
I mean, they're not always going to have the titles. Keep them both on. There's other female talent I'd rather see on Raw.
I like it. All right, now it's going to get hard. Wardlow.
Raw.
Ooh.
Raw for me. He'd work on SmackDown, but start him off on Raw.
Raw.
Really? All right, so as guys, let's put this in perspective really quickly. Right now, MJF, Jade Cargill, and I think Elliot, you put Jamie Hayter on SmackDown.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, you're just putting MJF on SmackDown. Everybody else right now is on Raw.
No,
Yeah.
I put Jade on SmackDown.
Oh, you put
Yeah,
Jade. Yeah, you said Jade on SmackDown. All right, let's have some fun.
Let's hear it.
I'll do about 3 more of these, and then we'll get out of here. But I'm really interested to see Hook.
Ooh.
Not everybody's going to fit exactly the way, and the characters are going to tweak over time. I'd say I'd put Hook on SmackDown.
I would say Raw.
If you had asked me 6 months ago,
I would say SmackDown.
I'm a Hook SmackDown person. I think he's a star that needs to even if he's on the lower level, he needs to be on the A show, right? Because I guess this is what this boils down to. Are you like a top talent carrying the B show, or are you on the A show somewhere, right?
Oh, I can think of top talent I'd want on the B show, and I would never consider them B level top talent,
Right.
A level top talent.
That's my thinking with like Orange Cassidy, for example.
Where do you but he's an A level talent carrying the B show.
Mm-hmm.
The Acclaim,
SmackDown. Yeah,
because they're just you want them on the A show.
Entertaining, fun. Not because
problem with having them on SmackDown is that's on broadcast TV, so you have to deal with the FCC, and that might interfere with their rap a little bit. Whereas on your you do it.
Everybody's favorite, the Young Bucks.
God.
OVW, NXT.
Yeah, what do you put them on? What do you put them on? They are workers. They work. Man.
Yeah.
In real life, I think they. Okay. So let me ask you one question.
Yeah.
In this scenario, are they still EVPs of the company, or are they?
No, let's just say no, like talent-wise, just talent.
Raw.
I'm building these 2 shows of Raw being sort of the dirtier, grittier, and SmackDown being a little more of the lights and the showmanship. So I put them on SmackDown.
Last one, and then we'll have to play this in the future because this is interesting. Swerve Strickland.
Oh God, I say SmackDown. I think he's really underrated, and I think he would be great on SmackDown.
I'd put him on SmackDown over Keith Lee, but since that wasn't the question, I'd put him on Raw. I'd put Ricky Starks on SmackDown. I'd put John Moxley on Raw.
Oh, I forgot about I should have asked about some of the Blackpool
Combat Club. I put on Raw.
I would put Swerve on SmackDown as well. But again, this is building up for a way where it's literally MJF and nobody on the the Acclaim, MJF, Jade Cargill. Like, who are these people going to fight? You know what I mean? It's an interesting. I love that. Gentlemen, we are coming up on an hour and 15. A lot of talk. Had a lot of fun today. A lot of AEW behind the scenes, nitty gritty stuff. I really, really enjoy it. Last words as we get out of here. What are we looking forward to as we go into the pay-per-view?
You mean
not
Backlash?
Not the Backlash pay-per-view. I meant as we go into the 4 pillars. What's it called? It's not because All In is just stuck in my brain. It's not All In.
Double or
What is
Nothing?
Double or
is
Nothing.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to. Is FTR going to have a dance partner at this show? I presume they will, but it hasn't revealed itself
I'm
yet.
gonna look at the card as we're talking here.
No, it's the Briscoe. Is it the Briscoe Jay Lethal son? By the way,
did you enjoy that?
I enjoyed that immensely.
Me too.
Sanjay, Satnam, Jay, they all going to the Briscoe's farm, the chicken farm. I thought it was great.
Who knew they made overalls that big?
That reminded me of some of the skits that AEW did when they first got on television, and that I loved. That was like, this is different than, it distinguishes itself as different than WWE. And usually those skits were led by like Jericho and the Appreciation Society, which 2.0 always still grows on me. But I love that skit. I thought that skit was great. I don't really care about a match at the Hardy compound. I think that's dumb, but besides.
Yeah. I'd like to see Adam Cole come full circle, get his win over Jericho. I don't really know much of the card yet, but I want to see.
The only match that's officially been announced is just the championship. That's it.
Yeah, and I think they bump up. I think you guys are right. We'll play Golden. We'll play like Crystal Ball in the future, but I do think Adam Cole is the next one that gets the run at MJF. But I don't know if that's Wembley, but we'll see. Gentlemen, you mentioned it, EJ, and I want to mention it again. Friend of the show, Will Washington, was announced as he's leaving, I guess, your other friend, Sean Ross Stapp or whatever his name is. He's leaving Fightful and joining AEW full time as somebody that's going to work on PR, live events, possibly some creative. Will Washington is a brilliant wrestling mind, so I hope that really goes well. So shout out to him. Shout out to our good buddy Muscleman Malcolm, who I invited to make a quick drop in on tonight's show just to tell us about his AEW experience last night. But if you notice, or if you follow Muscleman Malcolm, who's been on the show a couple times, he was in the AEW audience last night, getting some really, really interesting, really cool things happening to him. So really excited. It's only a matter of time before he is like the security guard or someone that gets punched in the face on AEW TV. So shout out to both of those friends on the show. We've got to get more friends back on the show. It's been a little while. So I'm going to count this thing out. As always, EJ the Collector, little to no access. TG, thank you. 1, 2, 3. We're out of here. We'll see you on Tuesday.